Okay, thanks so much. Now in our last video, you guys probably remember it very well, you have all your buckets. And you guys made a bucket up at Amazon. And this is going to represent the bucket that I'm using. Static web hosting, and you enabled that, right? And you went into Facebook, and then you went into this bucket, and you probably made an index page, or you made some resource where you were telling Facebook about the endpoint of this application, and that's all probably working okay by this point. My thoughts are, just keep going over it. Just keep repeating. Just keep reiterating, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to master it. Repetition creates mastery. The moment that you master stuff, your emotions are just going to go up. Mastery is at the heart of having a good time. So what I recommend is keep reiterating. Now, the next piece is going to be more challenging, because you're going to have a new cloud service that we're going to teach you tonight. What I think is there's going to be several videos. There's going to be this video where it's going to give you the 16,000-foot overview so you know where everything is and you know what you're dealing with. The second, we're going to talk about the JavaScript, what does what. And then the third one, we're going to do implementation and debugging. So we're going to talk about how to get past any problems that you're going to face, because you're going to have to actually start again with some fresh code with a new service and do the same process. And it may take you a little bit more time. So understanding that you got to try again, that's gonna benefit you. So here I am. This is my bucket, and the piece that I'm going to look at is called the DynamoDB API test, and that's going to be available on our GitHub under the Dynamo API set. Now, this is what I like to consider to be your toolkit. This is going to be a put example where you have the ability to upload files, images, and then this is going to be the data section where you have the ability to read, write, delete, update things in the cloud. I think that's exciting, and it has additional security that's happening. So it's over HTTPS, it has OAuth, with Facebook, and then it's integrating with the access controls that you define within your Amazon cloud. Guess what I found out today? Something shocking. iCloud? Part of the iCloud plugs into Amazon Web Services. Can you believe that? We're not quite sure which pieces, but Siri, it translates your voice in the cloud. iCloud, they are borrowing from Amazon Web Services. Isn't that heretical? The folks at Dropbox must be putting up their nose like, are you kidding? You haven't made your own cloud at this point? Or the folks at Twitter are like, you're Apple. You haven't made your own cloud at this point? Google's like, forget it. We knew all along. You guys are not doing your own cloud. So now I have even more bragging power. When I'm teaching you guys Amazon Web Services, well, that's iCloud. That's a big segment of what your phone is using right now. Every day you use Amazon Web Services. There's no getting around it. You're using it on your iCloud, you're using it on your Netflix. If you're using a company that was made in the last 7 years, it's likely that it's using AWS as well. So you are just melting into that big culture. Okay? So go ahead, go to DB API test. And let's explode this a little bit. Already the JavaScript is going to look very familiar, where you're drawing from Amazon, the Facebook. This is the same template. That's the totality of the contents of your head. You're making your FB root div, right? That's helping you to attach to Facebook and throw up the Facebook. And then we're going to have a couple of buttons, and this is what we're going to call the CRUD test. Create, replace, update, delete. It's called CRUD. I just like to call it I/O. Secure cloud I/O. That's what I'm looking for. Is this stream of updates, deletes, queries, replacement that you are facilitating through your JavaScript. So we'll get here probably in the next lecture. But let's shrink back and let's start from the start. So you've got your bucket that you've managed, and you're going to upload everything to the bucket. And now you're going to navigate down. Sorry about that. I had a student who taught me how to do this, and I'm horrible at it. Now you're going to navigate down to the database section of your cloud. It's called DynamoDB. Dynamo is a really good product. One of the things that you do when you're in Dynamo is you reserve the capacity that you want ahead of time. So you need to tell Amazon, hey, Amazon, I want this amount of computing power ahead of time. And Amazon reserves it for you, and that's what makes it so cheap. It's not an on-demand service. It's there reserved for you. So you kind of need to know how much you need, and then you need to tell Amazon ahead of time if you're going to need more capacity. So it's about 1/10 the cost of Amazon's other great database called SimpleDB, which is not written about very much. But one of the other advantages of DynamoDB is it's really ready for web browsers. So you remember the cores table that you made in S3? Going over, getting over your bucket. And you remember you were working with the cores configuration within this table. This is really the way that your HTTP headers are going to be accepted when talking back and forth to this bucket. And one of the cool things about DynamoDB is it has very comfortable cores. No, I don't want to delete that. I'm sorry. It has very comfortable cores configuration so that as you're passing data back and forth to DynamoDB, DynamoDB is very comfortably sending data back to your web browser. So one of the things that makes DynamoDB great is you do not need an additional Linux or Windows server back in the Amazon cloud to broker that HTTP traffic back to your web browser. DynamoDB is fully equipped to encode its JSON results, right, whatever you're getting back from the database, in a cores header that will work very well with your browser. And the problem is some of Amazon's other good databases, like SimpleDB, do not have that cores configuration. So despite the fact that you can talk to your DynamoDB from your browser, it's not going to work as well as DynamoDB. So DynamoDB, it's just what everybody's using, and Amazon is kind of making it, kind of forcing us into that. So what you have here in DynamoDB is you have a bunch of tables, and you can create a table here. The active, you create a table, you create a primary key, and then you just go forward with it. Now, one of the differences here is if you've taken a class where there's a MySQL, DynamoDB and MySQL are not that similar. So what you can do is you can go into the table and you can write as many attributes as you want to at a certain time, right, per row. There's no limit to the number of attributes per row. Versus in MySQL, you know ahead of time what the attributes are. Like I have a primary, I have an ID, and then I have a name, and I have a last name, and I have an address, and you already defined in MySQL what those attributes are. Largely because MySQL is very defined by the server. MySQL is very much defined by the disk. And MySQL is very much defined by the files that it creates and maintains. NoSQL databases are less tied to a single server. They're very comfortably distributed in RAM that is mapped across multiple servers. So the NoSQL databases have a very comfortable existence with clouds. Clouds offer many, many servers, and they offer middleware that index what is on the various servers. They're good. They've automated in that regard. That's a very simple description. So DynamoDB does not care if you have in one row more items than another, right? So this is going to be website test. This is going to be my sample table, and these are going to be the items. Now I don't have to assign ahead of time what the columns are going to be. So forget about columns. You can have as many columns per item as you wish. The only thing you do need to define when you create a table is what the primary key is going to be, and that is it. So when I go create table, you realize that I just create a table right here, and then you create. And you're saying, well, don't you want me to create the columns? Nope. Every single row can have its own array of data. So one row can be longer than the other. It doesn't care about that because it's just going to spread that row out somewhere within the cloud. So I'll go to website test. Now the key to this little table creator, and you can talk about the capacity. This is the amount that you buy per month. And there is cost. I believe that for the free tier, I don't think there is any cost if you have 5 read capacity units, 5 write capacity units. They very much want for you guys to be using DynamoDB within the free tier because it's so production ready. They want you to go ahead and try that out. Now for me, I'm no longer on my free tier, and I don't use Dynamo for my mobile app at this point. So I'm using another one of their services called SimpleDB. Now if you take a look in here and you say, well, where is SimpleDB? I don't see SimpleDB. Isn't that interesting? SimpleDB is they're really trying to not have you use SimpleDB. SimpleDB was the first database that you used. The great thing about SimpleDB is you don't need to know how much capacity you need ahead of time. So it just automatically expands. Here's the rub. SimpleDB works great with mobile devices like iOS, Android. It doesn't work at all with websites. So you can see that Amazon is kind of saying, look, that's how we became awesome in 2007. It's not what we're using right now in 2016. We've got Dynamo. So for new people like yourself who want to make websites, Dynamo is the place to be. So let's go into website test. That's my table. And I want you guys to pay attention to access control. Access control is going to have this wonderful relationship to identity and access management, or the IAM system. So what we do after you create that table is you run over here and you say, okay, I'm going to use Facebook to log in, right? Because DynamoDB has to accept the token from Facebook, right? Because DynamoDB is the server. You know, there are web servers there. It's just that you're hidden. Select the privileges that you'd like for the user to have. Like maybe you want them to be able to write things, or maybe you want to be able to get things. Maybe you want to be able to put items to it, which is the same as writing a row to it. And then you can also control the attributes. So there's a lot of fine-grained access control here, which you guys can configure. Right now, I'm just kind of doing a select all. I'm just kind of putting all the privileges on there. You guys will have the ability to select things granularly. I say create policy. Now what happens here is a little bit of Amazon markup gets generated. So you see these are the allows, and this is the name of the resource. And then what's interesting is that Amazon creates this condition that we actually need to delete. This piece right here, this condition piece, we need to delete that before it starts to work. So maybe Amazon in the future will kind of massage that out, but we need to get rid of that. So what I do is I'm going to control copy that. And the reason why I want that is because I'm going to add it to my identity and access management. Now, one thing that Amazon has done that I think is really cool is they give you these instructions right here, which is what to do. And so I'm going to show you very quickly what to do, but what you guys should do is you guys should memorize these steps. And it's quite simple. It's very commonsensical. You go over to AIM and you go over to your roles. And I have a role here called All Dynamo Website Test. I spelled that wrong, but. And you can see that I've inserted this policy. These are all the Dynamo powers that I want. And then I've also added that to my CSU 311 role that helps to combine my S3 ability to upload stuff. And so I go into that role, and then I'm able to edit that role, just like you guys did. So I have my S3 stuff there. And then what I've done is I've added my Dynamo stuff as well. So there's my SDB. And then I have my DynamoDB stuff as well. Now the one thing I want to do is, I think you remember that I said, hey, there's this condition phrase right here. I want you to delete that. That's not going to work. And that's just my experience. It doesn't work. And it shouldn't be there, but it is. So you can just delete that. Then you say validate policy, just in case you have some mistakes, which could happen. Oops. And I'm just going to cancel that for now. And when I edit it, I think I need to add, I think I omitted one of those. And then I'm going to validate. And that was good. And then we save. So now we say, okay, look, our CSU 311 is going to be the policy that we use both for uploading to the website as well as writing and reading data back to our DynamoDB. Okay, so once that is finished, you're in a really good position to say, okay, I'm going to include that CSU 311 role in all of my interactions with DynamoDB. And so, so given that, I'm gonna shut down this video, and then I'm gonna start up a new video in just a moment that's going to go through the JavaScript, and it's going to talk about how do you talk to the DynamoDB service. So that'll be available in a sec.